first, thank you again. I guess we'll start with, obviously a major piece in Camden Yards is William Donald Schaefer. Can you sort of explain what, as an aide, your role with him was like on a day-to-day basis and how you interacted?
So, how it is I connected with
Yeah.
Wayne? So, I'm a city planner originally, and I was working at the city planning department. I'll be quick about this. I was working at the city planning department, and sort of junior guy, didn't know anything, and was kind of working my way up. And the mayor was this giant figure, and I had no association with him at all. I worked a couple of years at city planning, and then the then deputy mayor of the city for development called me and offered me a job working on the mayor's staff, which was, for me, like the perfect combination of development and politics and public policy, and it was just a unique, terrific opportunity. So I came in as a junior aide to the, let's call it the deputy mayor, and along the way, I built a strong personal relationship earned my credibility, and was sort of witness to and engaged in this incredible series of events in Baltimore and then on to the state. As an advisor, over time, he sort of became like my uncle. Very close relationship. Keep going with the questions.
So why did you think Camden Yards was so important to him?
Okay, I could go on for a few minutes here. So I was working for the mayor. I think a lot of this dates back. First of all, there's this issue of Baltimore itself as a mid-sized city sandwiched between Philadelphia and D.C., and very often when you watch the national weather, you never even know Baltimore's there. So there's an identity and pride that is all interwoven in this story, and but it all, I think, dates back to the trauma that surrounded the city, the region, the state, with the departure of the Colts. And the loss of a major sports franchise was something that was almost unheard of in America at that time. And the city was flim-flammed and really insulted by the then owner of the Colts, Robert Irsay. And the dilemma that we faced was that then Memorial Stadium was owned by the city. And this was kind of a product of the times. Memorial Stadium, Baltimore couldn't possibly supply the capital funding to keep the city up to date, to keep the facility up to date. And it was dual use. It was baseball and football. And it didn't really satisfy either quite so well. So the entire state, in effect, except for maybe the Washington area, suffered real trauma with the loss of a sports franchise. And I know you hear other views of the economic importance of this and so on and so forth. But Mayor Schaefer understood the value of a professional sports franchise, baseball or football in those days, to the communal identity of a region. He himself was not especially a strong sports fan, but he understood what it meant to knitting a community together. So we went through this trauma with the Colts, and I think he knew that there was no way that we could afford the loss of the Orioles. So we had a declining facility, changing demands from sports leagues for the quality of facilities. For sure, separate facilities. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit for you. Now we get to, so the city's lost its football franchise. It has an aging facility. The ownership changes with the Orioles. And it evolved to through Eli Jacobs to Edward Bennett Williams. Edward Bennett Williams was this powerful attorney, Williams and Conley, DC guy all the way. And as he took over the ownership of the Orioles, he really didn't like the idea of having his friends from DC having to wind their way up to Baltimore and then wend their way through the streets up to 33rd and Ellerslie. And ultimately, there was always hanging over this, unspoken, but it didn't need to be spoken. Yeah, maybe he will listen to the siren song of moving to the Washington metropolitan area. So just continuing to wind forward here, you'll have a chance to weigh in. So 1986 arrives, and William Donald Schaefer becomes a candidate for governor. So everything I just told you is sort of in a backdrop there. There's the trauma of the Colts. There's this guy in D.C. who's now the owner of the Orioles, and it's just hanging in the air. Whither goest the Orioles? In the Maryland's Democratic state, in the Democratic primary, before William Donald Schaefer jumped into the primary, his opponent, Steve Saxon, had just said, I think Baltimore needs a replacement facility, and I think it should be on the Beltway where I-95 and the Beltway come together. And that was kind of the thing. If you like in Kansas City, that's what regions were doing. They were building stadiums, nondescript, not particularly attractive stadiums, on the interstate. William Donald Schaefer jumps into the race. This is an issue. It wasn't the premier issue, and I mean his instinct was no, it needs to be in this downtown in the city. Pretty radical at the time. I'm going to give you. You have a question?
Sure.
I'll stop there because that's a good place to stop.
Going back to the Colts leaving, were you with him when that?
Totally was with him. Went through all of it.
What was that reaction like? Like, take me through the day.
So, Robert Ursay couldn't have gone more out of his way to make himself the devil in this play. And you have to remember, at the time, and the nation was watching because community had really experienced this before, quite this way. And he would play. The Colts would play exhibition games in Florida. He was marketing, testing. He was building the bidding for the Colts. And William Donald Schaefer knew, and if you follow the clips or investigate this at all, he did his best to try and not alienate Robert Ursay in this. It was just his instinct was maybe we can bring this guy along. Meantime, Ursay was doing unbelievably outrageous things with the team, with the coaches. Attendance was declining. The Colts were less and less competitive. It was a spiraling kind of disaster. And remember, Baltimore had a little bit of an inferiority complex anyway, and so now we're threatening the loss of this storied franchise. I just lost my train of thought. So I was in City Hall the day that Governor Schaefer drove out to what is today BWI Airport. Robert Ursay had landed on his jet. The whole community was thinking, he's really demeaning himself, kowtowing to this guy who's has no good end for Baltimore. The whole community is watching. The media were everywhere. Sandy was probably reporting it. And then not too long thereafter, the community woke up to have the moving van show up at the then Owings Mills Colts practice facility and move in the dark of night the franchise and all the Colts memorabilia and everything to Indianapolis. So now we're like in free fall there. And the NFL was apoplectic about this. They were really concerned about the effect they're standing with the Congress. I remember going to congressional hearings, and the NFL was doing its best to not jeopardize its standing in the Congress and with the public opinion and so on. So anyway, that's kind of the backdrop. So I experienced all that with him. It was wrenching for him, and it really caused him to double down on ensuring that both that the Orioles were retained and that a pathway was left to bring back NFL football to Baltimore. So I see his contribution as really twofold: spurring Camden Yards, but leaving open the possibility of bringing back an NFL franchise to Baltimore.
And I know his leadership style has been talked about a lot, just how he carried himself, went about things. How would you sort of say that contributed to the ballpark project and creation, his style?
Crucial. So you have to remember, so the Maryland politics are different today than they were then. So, and some of it has to do with the way the media, generous media he had, because he was giving people hope for the city. So he was highly admired around the Baltimore region and really the entire state because of his passion for the city. So he gets himself elected in 1986 and wins the primary. Remember, it's a Democratic state, but he wins the primary. He wins 82% of the vote in the general election in 1986. So he's coming in. What I'm getting to is he arrives in Annapolis with a pile of political capital, and how he chose to spend it is really my answer to your question. He pushed a pile of chips to the center of the table in order to make that stadium happen. The Stadium Authority had been created, but it was just a shell of an organization. Remember, I told you the city owned the stadium. That was impossible. It couldn't possibly have executed what happened. So we had the structure to advance the construction of the stadium, and he basically took advantage of his standing in the Baltimore region, and this is an overstatement a little bit, but he sort of browbeat the Washington area into supporting this. And so it happened. The funding and the funding support was put in place. And then I think one of the real stories that's really not fully understood was what a miracle it was to clear the site to build the stadium in the first place. Why don't I stop there?
In politics, I know a lot of times different people might have different leverages. Why was he able to use his so effectively in actually making it happen, do you think?
Well, I mean, a couple of different reasons. I mean, one is the governor of Maryland, by constitution, is the most powerful governor in the country, and he had this, at least particularly at the very beginning. I mean, he was commanding. He had a lot of power. He was politically popular. He had a skilled team of legislative staff around him, including the then lieutenant governor, who ultimately was alienated. And they executed. It was like a lightning strike, creating the funding stream to build the stadium. But what I'm saying is, even apart from that, just the fact that you could create that site in a dense urban setting and have it constructed in pretty much record time on budget. So the stadium authority personnel were really fantastic. I hope you're going to, Sandy, interview Bruce Hoffman about this. Anyway, so I think and then there was incredible excitement around the stadium, watching it be built.
And in an interview, you mentioned that your effort for him was your best cause. Why were you sort of so passionate about, your work with him?
In general, or on this topic?
Both.
Well, just on this topic, because I had experienced it. I mean, I'm a sports fan. I knew how important the Orioles were. But I grew up in the Washington area, so I kind of sort of had a little bit of an understanding of the difference. The Baltimore psychology was bruised, and this was a salve for that. Sports are powerful. I know you're going to talk to economists and other detractors. This same tale plays out everywhere. You told me you're from Chicago, so they're having this whole thing right now about whether to rebuild the football stadium or move out to the suburbs. They just did it in Buffalo. It's everywhere. Some of it's not entirely rational. Some of it's economic. Some of it's about community cohesion. So anyway, it was a privilege for me to be part of this. You can see how important Camden Yards and that whole complex now are to the identity of Baltimore and the region. For me, I told you I was just a young guy, got connected to this fierce, sometimes unpredictable leader, but you could never question his motives. I mean, you always knew where he wanted to drive things. And it was just a very powerful experience for me.
And I know, at least from what we've read, it seemed like you guys were generally pretty aligned with things. Was there anything throughout the, ballpark's creation, that process, that you maybe didn't see eye to eye or just thought differently about?
So this is not really a direct response, but I think it will probably come up in what you're doing. There was the whole issue of the warehouse itself. And this is where the power of William Donald Schaefer came in. It wasn't the Stadium Authority didn't have ownership of the warehouse. A friend and political ally of William Donald Schaefer had partial ownership, but ultimately he persuaded them to sell, to make the complex. But there was an open issue about whether to retain the warehouse. Because it's crazy now, but if you think about it, absent the warehouse, you could almost have a clear view from home plate to the harbor. Anyway, it's almost like serendipity. All the right decisions were made. Keep the warehouse. Harken back to the old stadiums from another era with some of the touches there. The Camden Yards name, Oriole Park at Camden Yards. How did that happen? Because you had an owner who wanted it to be Oriole Park, and William Donald Schaefer wanted it to be Camden Yards. So they tussled a little bit, formally struck the Oriole Park at Camden Yards, but everybody refers to it as Camden Yards now. Sometimes William Donald Schaefer's methods were a little brutal, and I probably questioned that, but I never questioned his instincts.
And then, just curious about the warehouse. I know you mentioned that. What was his thoughts?
He made the decision, keep the warehouse. I mean, at heart, he was a preservationist, and he's the one who should have been the city planner. I mean, his physical instincts were very strong, very strong. And The other thing I would say about how all this happened is if he had good people, he would let them run the play. So the execution of the clearing the site, most of the design and the construction, he didn't tinker with at all. Sorry, he's the good cop. You're the bad cop.
I hope I'm not the bad cop. I hope I can.
Does he look bad?
No, I'm just joking. No.
I hope not. But I kind of wanted to pivot to, the actual starting of the creation of the ballpark itself. We are talking to people who are on the opposition side, such as taxpayer opposition.
Right.
What was the challenges that you guys were facing as part of the administration for the creation of the ballpark? Who were the opposition players, and what kind of challenges did you guys face?
Well, I think so. You can almost read. As I was saying earlier, you can almost read from a textbook. This goes on in every community where a new, big time public involvement in a new sports facility comes up. You'll have citizens who will question it, and it's a legitimate point of view. You'll have, there's a whole group of economists around the country where people in the media will go to, and they'll be happy to tell you how this is irrational. There was all that. Then in the geopolitics of Maryland, there was hesitation from elected officials in the Washington suburbs. Didn't see this in their interest. Saw it as a boondoggle for Baltimore. Were in some instances just put off by this powerful, sometimes domineering guy from Baltimore as an elected official. I would say the people but editorially, I think the local media was maybe somewhat ambivalent, but they knew this thing was inevitable and should happen for the larger community good. So it happened. Mm-hmm. But I will say, but it takes strong leadership to push something like this through, and that's not always the case in these sports equations.
Yeah. So obviously there was to be expected pushback, and you need strong leadership to be able to go through with those mm-hmm. plans. How were you guys able to address those concerns that some taxpayers are like, I don't want to fund the stadium, especially since there was also, I know, a proposition that they wanted to fund it through the state lottery system potentially.
Right.
So how did you guys address those concerns?
I'm trying to remember the exact funding structure, but I think mm-hmm. the funding structure really was what put it over the top. Yeah. That it was going to, I think it's from admissions taxes or a lottery or what that it was a new funding source that would pay for it. Part of my experience with the stadium reminds me of the initial battle to build the Baltimore Aquarium, the National Aquarium. Today, or Harbor Place, which I know is a little difficult to believe today, but it's hard to find people who admit they were opponents, maybe with one exception you saw this morning, to some of these big projects which were risky that had the desired effect.
So how did the administration engage with city officials and state legislature to sort of move the project forward as time passed and you guys needed to make advancements on the project?
Well, remember, this all happened early. This happened in like the first year or two, which is when you have all your political capital sitting in front of you. The governor of Maryland is very powerful. Just to remind you, this has changed a little bit since then, but at the time, the legislature could only cut the budget. They couldn't add to the budget. So everybody has a pet project or a pet interest. So at the political core of it, you don't want to alienate that's at work today. You don't want to alienate the Democratic governor in Maryland. A lot of people, particularly from the Baltimore area, were on board they had experienced the same loss with the Colts, the same tentativeness around the ownership of the Orioles. And, there's this always hovering over Baltimore as this, we're a second tier city. People were forgotten. And, what would happen if suddenly we were without any major sports? We don't have a hockey team. We had lost the NBA team. This was really rock bottom necessity for Baltimore to retain the Orioles.
And I wanted to ask you personally, with a degree in urban planning, what did you foresee the sort of impact that the stadium would have on downtown Baltimore, and what do you think the impacts are?
Now,
today?
well, that's a different question.
Kind of a two-parter.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention here was, but that I think you might find interesting as you think this through is, one of the benefits of Camden Yards being where it is the multiple outlets for traffic to move. So when you come to Camden Yards and you want to leave the game after the ninth inning, you don't have what many other stadiums have. You can get out of there in 10 or 15 minutes. Just almost, it wasn't calculated, but the light rail line that sits astride the stadium was opening simultaneous with the stadium. And there was an exhibition game played, the first exhibition game played at Camden Yards a couple days before opening day. We had no idea exactly how that was all going to work, with the light rail working, traffic streaming onto 95 and the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, and then filtering out into the city streets. And miraculously, it worked even better than expected. So all that, I think, contributed. The stadium in the early stages was drawing 3 million people a year, so that was a boon to the downtown. There was excitement. It was beyond a regional draw. I mean, in fact, even today, people visit Camden Yards just to visit Camden Yards. I mean, you can go there almost any day, whether a game is being played or not, and you'll find tourists taking the tour of the stadium. I mean, there are certain architectural signature pieces that give a city an image. The aquarium's one, but I think Camden Yards is another. I think people take great pride when they see that Camden Yards is one of the go-to stadiums in the country. And anyway.
When the stadium design was actually sort of completed, you had the blueprints and all of that, were you satisfied with what the stadium looked like at that point? Or was there something about the stadium that you didn't really like about the design?
That's a good question. No, I was the amateur sports fan there. I was sort of mesmerized by the whole thing. And no, I can't say that, as you're researching this, there was a lot of back and forth about the architectural touches and what should be included and not. You're reminding me of something. I went on a 2-day tour with Governor Schaefer, 1 or 2 members of the Stadium Authority, a couple members of the Orioles. In the design phase, in the HOK, the architects, they were in Kansas City, and we did this. This is fun for me to tell, and I guess there's a point to it. We flew to Chicago, went to Wrigley Field. I'd never been to Wrigley Field. Very cool, ancient. But it had the kind of the feel, the touch that Camden Yards ascribed to. We flew from there to Kansas City. At that time, Arrowhead Stadium had these sort of lavish player facilities, locker rooms, and so on. And then we overnighted there, and then we flew to Miami. It was all in the space of 2 days. And we went to what was then Joe Robbie Stadium. Why? Because this was the first stadium that had club seats. And so today, you see this amalgam of Wrigley Field, player, over-the-top player facilities, and club seats, all incorporated into one facility. And then, I think you know this. After that came Denver and Cleveland. And if you go to Denver or Cleveland, you'll see sort of their version of Camden Yards. Anyway, I can go off on that. But I think there's a lot of pride in the tone that Camden Yards set for most Baltimoreans. Yeah, this is well rehearsed. It's interesting.
Then shifting a little bit towards the economic side of things, what role did budget negotiations play throughout the project in determining the final scope of Camden Yards?
Well, as I said, I'm not sure it was. It was one thing to secure the legislative approval and the funding source to offset it, but having a skilled team to build it, to oversee the design and the construction, I think that's sort of underappreciated. Because lots of parts of the country, these projects can be boondoggles, overruns, and so we had high quality stadium authority leadership. We had a crackerjack construction manager, local firm, Whiting Turner. They weren't going to screw this up. So the implementation part of this, which people just assume would, and also I mentioned this earlier. You look now and you see a stadium. I close my eyes and I see a middle school, a commercial bakery, a wholesale food distribution operation. I'm trying to remember, a chemical place. There was an entertainment facility. All these things had to be relocated. The site cleared in order to stay on schedule. And you may or may not know in your life experience to this point, executing a renewal project like that, relocating everyone, and doing it without too much political difficulty is a miracle. It is a miracle. And all that just happened to fall into place.
And regarding the economic side, what justifications were sort of used to defend sort of everything that went into it? Rising property values, supporting the tourism and hospitality industry, the jobs that would be created at the stadium, construction jobs, permanent jobs, the radiant effect for the redeveloping the rest of downtown. All those things were at play. Can they all be properly quantified? Probably not. A lot of this is on faith and on the passion we all have for professional sports, for sports in general. And it's undeniable, and you can try and explain your array around it, but it's part of what this is about. And if this were happening today in today's political climate? Great question. What's similar or different, do you think? No, I hadn't given that thought. I'm glad we don't have to face it. And actually, one of the reasons we don't have to face it right now, I'll come back to how I think I would answer that, is the wisdom of the way the Stadium Authority has been structured, and the fact that we now, Camden Yards is 30 years old, approaching 30 years old. That you know that the state has authorized funding to support the renewal of Camden Yards and the Ravens Stadium
Otherwise, when this community's certainly been through it. I mean, I don't know that this current set of ownership would be it, but we've experienced where the gun to the head kind of game is played. So the wisdom of continuing to ensure really the competitiveness of our facilities is crucial. So just one other point on your question, which is geopolitically, I mean, Baltimore is a very different place today than it was 30 years ago. The geopolitics of Maryland have shifted to the Washington metropolitan area. They have their own team. We'll see how they do in retaining the commanders. I doubt that happens. So I'm not sure you could have the same kind of chemistry to have a lightning strike and build a stadium in Baltimore today. It would be a different, it probably would happen, but it would be very different in the way the politics would play out.
Wrapping it up here with some good cop questions. I think we got a few relatively fun ones, just because.
I'm going to get graded separately by your professor, but that's okay.
There you go. But no, we're asking these to just about everyone that we interview. But I saw the ticket that you showed me, so I guess just tell me the story of what you were doing on opening day, 1992.
Yeah. It was a festive day in Baltimore. I mean, it was sort of like a kind of a day of renewal. There was already the excitement had been created around the quality of the design. I think it was by then that the architectural critic of the New York Times had heaped praise on it, and so we were already like feeling pretty good about all this, and it was a celebratory day. I remember being in the mayor's box, and everybody wanted to be part of it. It was all part of the renewal of Baltimore, the kind of the sense of relief that, well, we've got a gem on our hands here. The Orioles are here. They're not going anywhere. We're being recognized nationally. It's like a pop your buttons kind of day for really for Maryland. And if you've been to the stadium?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the magic parts of the baseball stadium is the hallway where the boxes are. So if you walk down that hallway, like on opening day, you will see pretty much anybody of prominence in Maryland. It was really it's like Main Street, Maryland, and then the whole festive atmosphere around opening day is, I think, exhilarates everybody, whether they're at the game or not. It's like Easter. It's like a sense of renewal, right? So that day was it was a triumphant day. It was.
And now seeing that ticket, I'm just kind of wondering how did you actually get the ticket? Who gave it to you? Did you get it?
I think it was a memento.
A memento. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have my original ticket somewhere, but
Like
I've got a similar one from the All-Star game a couple of years later.
Mm-hmm. And then you already kind of described it a little bit, but was there a different mood or feeling about this opening day compared to ones past? Do you remember other opening days and this one being different, or?
Well, I mean, I think it was. So going back to William Donald Schaefer, I remember before Camden Yards opened, it was almost obligatory for him to be there for opening day, and he would invite a couple of his old pals and stay for like 3 innings and leave. I mean, he really wasn't a baseball fan. He just understood intuitively the value to the community. In this particular, he was. I've told him this. He was. It's maybe what contributed to his leadership genius is he could never savor a victory. He was always feeling maybe this insecurity, this need to move on to the next challenge. So I'm not even sure he was there. And I'm sure he thoroughly enjoyed it, but he was already thinking about you know, what's next on my list to do. Just part of what moved him.
Yeah, and then to finish it off, the first time you walked into the completed stadium, what were your thoughts, feelings, mood after everything you've gone through and just seeing the stadium for the first time?
I don't think then, although I was certainly feeling a sense of pride and triumph, I don't think I could have completely understood the impact it would have on the community, the way the sports community viewed Baltimore. To me, that's one of the lasting impacts is Camden Yards, Baltimore. If you're an American and you know anything about baseball, you're familiar with Camden Yards.